Hopefully we should be live.
Are we live?
I have to wait for something to appear. Oh no, I think I have to hit this. There you go. We are live. There you go. It worked.
Well, I don't know.
I don't know. I thought we had to press another button, but lo and behold.
Good evening and hello and thank you. If somebody could just say, yes, you see us, so we know for sure, because you know how technical things are technically technical.
Yes, and we've been moving the whole house around this afternoon, so... Yes, we emptied the studio at one point.
Filled it back up again.
Well, people are sending hearts, so...
All right, so hopefully they can see us.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello.
Good evening. Are we working?
Are we working? Can you hear us? Can you see us? Is everything good?
I see you, yes. Thank you. That's wonderful. So,
right.
So at least we know we've got it plugged in right.
All right, so as we may recall, our estate agent had built his sanctuary down at the bottom of the garden to get away from his lovely family.
Yes, and engaged the help of one certain old lady who he was going to throw onto the streets, but she became his hired help.
There you are.
So they could build their petrol station and knock down the cottages, but whatever.
Right.
That's where you are, if you don't remember.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2.
Ooh. Pages are very thick. All right, Chapter 2. I must say I loved that place. My sitting room had 4 dormer windows, full south, and my bedroom faced east, and the sun called me every morning. I fixed up a wide brick hearth and burnt peat from the marshes and had the space either side of it shelved and began to collect books that I had always wanted. I had never been able to do that before because there wasn't room in my bedroom, and I disliked the idea of having my books about the house. There is something very intimate and personal about one's books. They reveal much about one's private soul. I had no mind to wear my books on my sleeve for my sister to peck at. Besides, they would probably have corrupted the friendly girls and sent the servants talking.
Oh my, the friendly girls. What was in his books, one wonders?
Yeah, well, a bit of magic, I assume, but I don't know. He hasn't quite gotten to the
got there
Priestess
yet, has he? He
All
hasn't
right.
quite got there.
I'm afraid it was rather mean of me, but I very much disliked the idea of my sister visiting my stable. I suppose she is a decent creature in her way. In fact, she's very highly thought of in town. But we have got nothing in common. My mother always called me the changeling. God knows how I came to be born into our family. My sister and I have always been like a cat and a dog. And since I developed my asthma and my temper got short, I have been the cat.
Oh dear.
Anyway, I didn't want her. All the same, I knew it was hopeless to try to keep her out. All I could do was to put a Yale lock on the door to make her knock for admission. Things turned out better than I expected, however. She fell foul of Sally right away. That's the old lady servant, yeah. She fell foul of Sally right away by pulling up over her work.
Pulling her up over her work. She complained about her work. Oh, that's nice.
I admit she wasn't a good duster, but she was a champion cook. My sister, on the other hand, was a good cleaner, but a foul feeder. Sadly told my sister that she'd worked for me and wasn't taking orders from anybody but me. Ha ha, Sally, go Sally. My sister came to me and demanded Sally's head on a charger. I said that Sally suited me and it wasn't going to get her sacked. And she wasn't going to get her sacked. I liked the dirt. It made my place more homey. See, they say homely, but that's a whole different thing to us. My sister said she wouldn't enter the place again while Sally was there, even if I lay on my deathbed. I said, righto, that
Charming.
suits me fine. So we left it at that, and she kept her word. So it ended that my partner, Scotty, and the doctor were the only folk who ever set foot in the place, and they loved it. The trouble was that when they got in, they wouldn't get out. But they just sat there yarning. That's telling stories.
Yes, telling yarns, see?
Yes.
Spinning a yarn.
Now, they were very good chaps in their own way, especially Scotty. In fact, They were plenty of a decent chap in the town and around. Fellows could go to in their difficulties. I knew them all and was friendly with everybody, and it was my business to be. But all the same, I had no real friends except perhaps Scotty in his queer way. He and I had nothing really in common, and each went our own way, but I could trust him and his in any emergency. There are worse foundations for friendships than that.
Indeed there are. Oh, you want me to read? Right, fair enough then.
Something off of here, I think.
I don't know. He is an odd bird with an odder history. His parents were on the stage, and when they were here with the touring company, they went sick with the flu and died of it. Oh dear. First one, then the other, and little Scotty ended up in the workhouse. Do you know what a workhouse is? Do we have to explain?
Yeah, we don't know what a workhouse is.
Okay, so a workhouse is where the poor go, and they it was like, Victorian England kind of thing, but they were basically, you get your labour for free in exchange for room and board, but it was brutal. It was, Oliver Twist was in a workhouse.
There you go.
Please, sir, may I have more? Yeah,
more,
boy.
will buy this wonderful feeling.
So, in the workhouse, but even at the tender age of 3, his Scotch accent was well established. It has never been eradicated, and whatever came after was budded on the parent's stock. He picked up the local dialect from the paupers, and God willed it that the master and his wife should be Cockneys. The result is a regular plaid of an accent, a bit like mine, I guess. Cockney Scottish, that's weird, isn't it?
Oh my goodness.
Right, it is sort of down a smoke governor. I can't do it. Anyway, fortunately, he's a man of few words. But what with his portentous silence and my disinclination to drive a hard bargain, we built up a terrific local reputation for probity, which in the long run paid us better than larger profits on the individual deals, though my sister foamed at the mouth when she heard of some of them. If everybody had their rights, she would have been running the business, and I, the girls, friendly.
Oh, God.
Scotty's education was the usual, but the Scotch came out in him, and he made the most of it. If there had been anyone to see about scholarships for him, he would have probably got on, but there was no one, and as soon as he finished school age, they got him a job with us as an office boy and made him self-supporting. My education was also the usual. I was sent to the local academy for the son of gents, and that just describes us. It was a debilitating establishment for both mind and body. I got no good from it, that I knew of. But then, on the other hand, I don't know that I took any particular harm. It closed down when the head ran away with the damsel from the local sweet shop.
Oh, lovely. It's quite a town.
An appropriate
quite
end.
a town they've got going there.
Isn't it? An appropriate end, for it was an establishment that combined saccharine and muck in an amazing manner, in practically high precepts in the classrooms and unbelievably low practices in the dormitories. Even at the tender age, I used to wonder if the head had ever been a boy himself, and doubted it. I gathered such worldly wisdom as falls on the lot of adolescent louts under such circumstances, which I suppose is better than nothing. I never went away from home, except for short holidays. When I arrived at the office under my father, Scotty was already well established and had developed the most extraordinary air of an elderly clerk who had been with the firm for generations. He always spoke of my father as Mr. Edward, after my arrival, as if he had held this position under his father. But even when he is sitting on my bed, he never calls me anything except Mr. Wilfred.
Why is he sitting on his bed?
Well, I don't know. Makes the mind boggle.
Kind of odd.
We were just about the same age, but whereas Scotty was already circumspect businessman, I was a callow hobbledehoy. Okay then.
Great
So
English
it's good to
words
be
in
a
here.
callow hobbledehoy. I liked old Scotty from the first, but my father put his foot down on any sort of personal friendship owing to his workhouse origin. However, when my father's death threw everything into confusion, it was Scotty who steadied things. Our old head clerk just wept. Scotty and I had to shore him up, youngsters though we were. Everyone thought it was he who steered me through, and so you would have thought it was to hear him talk after the troubles were over. But as a matter of fact, it was Scotty. When my asthma began, I soon saw that I was going to be a very uncertain quantity in the business. I was no good relying on me for routine work. I'd never been a good auctioneer, even at the best of times. A good auctioneer is a gift of God. Moreover, I am slightly short-sighted, and I either get myself accused of favouritism by indignant females because I miss their bids, or else knock things down to people who don't want them. I once sold 5 lots to an unfortunate individual with a running cold before I realised he was repressing sneezes and not bidding. My specialty is what valuing. And I'll value anything except pictures. Do you want to read now? Or do you
Sure.
When the doctor...
When the doctor saw the way I was shaping, he told me I ought to take a partner. I asked him to break it gently to my family that a partner would have to be taken into the business. He did, and they agreed. They still had their original wind-up over me. What they didn't agree to, though, was the partner that I chose, which was Scotty. They had hoped that we should get something country that wanted to mend its fallen fortunes. They raised a terrific yelp, as I knew they would. I admit he is horribly common, and that his taste in clothes is deplorable, and that his...
H is uncertain.
H's.
H's, yes.
Is that like mannerisms?
I don't know. I'd have to go look that up. I don't know.
But he is honest and
Don't
shrewd
know where my
and
phone
kindly, and a dashed good worker, so I persevered. I cannot see that I have let the business down, as our sort of clients don't call on their house agents in any case. They never have on us anyway. A sneezing fit.
God, the pollen's getting to me
I know,
today.
bless
I'm
you.
so sorry.
And I have never cherished any illusion that they ever would, even if my sister has. To want workers for a flag day is one thing. To want the pleasure of your company is another. There is no one I would sooner have come sit with me after a good asthma, after a good go of asthma, than old Scotty. And that is a pretty good test. He sits like a hen, says not a word, but is uncommonly matey all the same. So I took him into partnership, and I think I had the best of the bargain. It is a curious characteristic of my family that they will oppose a thing tooth and nail even when they have nothing to put in its place. Scotty got married soon after he was made partner. I suppose that it's bound to make a difference to a friendship, even if you like the wife, and I didn't. She was all right in her way, like everybody else.
Oh,
Must be
dear.
Aquarian. He doesn't like anybody. My sister thought her a very worthy girl. She was the daughter of the local undertaker. You know, that's going to be a business that lasts forever.
They're dying to get into it.
Now auctioneers are a cut above undertakers. I don't quite know what undertakers pair off with, so I should have thought she would have considered that. That was letting the business down still further, but apparently not. Odd, isn't it, that Scotty's commonness doesn't worry me, but I can't stand his wife, and her commonness doesn't worry my sister, but she can't stand his. Scottish marriage left a gap in what had never been very densely populated. He wasn't much of a companion, but he was a friend, all right. After Scotty had settled down to the partnership, I took no part at all in the routine, but stuck altogether to the valuing. That was the part of the business I liked. It took me out to the country, and I met interesting people, especially when the...
Assizes were on.
that's like to tell you how much your house
Yep.
is worth, yeah.
Yep.
For I was often wanted as an expert witness, which is a great lark if you have a sense of humor. Sometimes one barrister had me to give evidence, and sometimes another, and the fellow who had held me up as the last word on the essay would be trying to make out that I was mud to the next. Then after it was all over, I should dine with them at the George.
At the George, that's the pub, isn't it? It's always
And the
called
landlord, who was a pal of mine, would set to work to make us all tight. He never managed it with me, not unduly at any rate, because I knew his stock, for I used to pick the stuff up for him at the auctions, and jolly good some of it was too, but we generally fixed them between us. Now all that sort of thing is very fun, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but the barristers were here today and gone tomorrow, and though I enjoyed them enormously while I had them, it never ripened into friendship. However, in the end, I settled down, more or less, with Sally and my books and the wireless. Everybody said I was damned unsocial, but God knows I wasn't unsocial if I could have got some sort of society I liked. I'm afraid I played my asthma for all it was worth. So I have read voraciously, and I have read queerly, and I have read a lot of theosophical stuff, for one thing, which I couldn't have done, not in the comfort anyway, if I had still sat in that house. So of it I liked, and some of it I liked, and some I didn't. I accepted reincarnation. It was the best thing of its kind I'd ever come across and helped me a lot. This life looked like being a washout, so I pinned my hopes on the next. When I had nothing better to do, I used to think about the last. I always had to lay up for a day or two after asthma. One gets rather fed up with books after a bit, and I had never encouraged visitors at the best of times, and these were not the best of times with me. I probably could have not talked if they had come, so I used to lie and think and wonder and amuse myself by reconstructing my past lives. Now it is an odd thing that I, who cannot piece together a plot for a novel to save my life, much as I liked observing people, could construct the most elaborate and fantastic past incarnations for myself. Moreover, after I've been working at them all day, as I would be when I was getting out of a bout of asthma, I would begin to dream about them. And on the occasion when I had to be doped, I would dream of them with extraordinary vividness. I used to lie between sleeping and waking, and I don't suppose I should have stirred if the house had gone on fire under me. In that state, my mind seemed to process a power of penetration it possessed at no other time. In the ordinary way, I skated. Skated?
Yep.
In the ordinary way, I
spell things differently, I'm sorry.
Yeah, skated about over surfaces and saw no further through a brick wall than most, and my own feelings were an obscure muddle to me, overlaid by what I thought I ought to be and honestly tried to be. But when I lay doped like this, I had no delusions. Now, the odd thing about this state was its curious inverted sense of reality. Normal things were far away and remote and didn't matter. But the inner kingdom, as I called it, to which I had been transported by the prick of a syringe, my wishes were law, and I could create anything I wanted, just thinking about it.
Oh, he's high on laudanum.
I have a pretty good idea why people take to dope to escape from reality and abandon life for a pipe dream that never miss it. I dare say I owe a good deal of to the Dangerous Drugs Act. I can best compare my life to a vitaminless diet, plenty of nutritive bulk, and a little something that meant health was lacking. I suppose my trouble was really spiritual scurvy. They say that a badly managed horse can develop stable vices such as crib biting. What with my dope dreams and theosophical reading, I began to get on to Peter Ibsen's idea of dreaming true. I gradually learnt that knack of the day, dream. And although I could not obtain the same reality as I got when I was doped, I got quite a bit, and every now and again daydream would carry over into a night dream, and I got something worthwhile. What was I doing? I suppose really a very superior sort of novel reading, for after all, we read novels as a kind of supplement to a daily life. If you look over the shoulder in the mindset of the mindset man in the railway carriage, you will find he's reading the bloodiest novel. The milder the man, the bloodier the novel. And as for maiden ladies, any particularly tough-looking individual with overseas tan still on his skin is probably reading a gardening paper. You want to read here?
Sure, if you want. Thrillers are, it seems to me, an attempt to vitaminize our spiritual diet.
Vitaminize?
However you would say it.
They're very weird words to try to read and make them...
Add some vitamins to your spiritual diet. Of course, the difficulty is to get exactly the thriller prescription you want. One may be able to identify oneself with the hero for vicarious adventure, but the heroines are always so piffling. I gradually got more and more expert at compounding my own romantic prescriptions and less dependent on the ready-made kind.
Ooh.
I almost came to look forward to my bouts of asthma because I knew it meant a dose of dope, and then the fantasies would become real and take charge, and I would see life in the most extraordinary fashion.
Ooh.
I also developed my power of feeling with nature things. I had my first experience of this when I accidentally got in touch with the moon during my first attack. Later I read some of Algernon Blackwood's books, also The Projection of the Astral Body by Muldoon and Carrington. These gave me ideas. Muldoon had poor health, and when he was lowered by illness he found he could slip out of his body. Asthma is also a lowering thing at the time. Mystics who want visions always fast. Any asthmatic who wants a night's sleep always sleeps on an empty stomach. Put the three together, the asthma, the drugs and the going supperless to bed, and you have all the conditions for slipping out of your body, or so it seemed to me. The only drawback is that it was odds on as to whether one slipped back again. To be perfectly honest, I should not have minded very much if I hadn't, in theory anyway. Though on the one or two occasions when I nearly put it to the test, I fought like a fiend. I hope this doesn't bore you, but it amused me enormously at the time. And anyway, one cannot please everybody, so one may as well please oneself. Should I continue on chapter 3?
Oh yeah, we've only been about 20 minutes. I think
Yes.
it's a short chapter. We might get 2 chapters in tonight.
Chapter 3. Well, to continue. I said my power to build up my reincarnation fantasies developed gradually. This is true in a way, and in a way it isn't. It developed in a series of jerks. I would go for some time and get nothing, and then I would get a sudden step forward.
Aha!
Then I would go on again for another blank patch, and then another step. I had read in the theosophical literature that the best way of remembering your past incarnations was to go over the day backwards every night when you got to bed. I tried that, but I don't think that there is anything in it. You do not actually think backwards. You think in a series of disconnected pictures arranged in the reverse order, which is not the same thing. At least I did, and if anybody does anything different, I should be interested to hear what it is. Personally, I think a lot of that stuff is eyewash. I had always been fascinated by ancient Egypt, and as in these realms of fancy, there is no extra charge for anything. It amused me to think that in a past incarnation I had been an Egyptian. Then left rather a long gap between now and then, during which I slept with the worms, a boring occupation. So I decided that I'd also been an alchemist who, needless to say, discovered the Philosopher's Stone. Then, one Sunday evening, I went to church with the family, as I do occasionally for the sake of peace and quietness in the business, for one must do these things when one lives in a small place.
Yeah, keep the status quo.
There was a visiting parson who read the lessons, and he read them rather well. I never realised before what magnificent literature the authorised version is. We had the part about the flight into Egypt and the gold and frankincense and myrrh and the 3 wise men who were led of a star, and I was fascinated by it. When I got home I hunted up the Bible that had been given to me when I was christened, and that I had never looked upon at since, save under compulsion, and read it all up. I also read about Moses being trained in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and Daniel in the wisdom of the Babylonians.
There's quite a lot of
We
fiction
hear a
in there,
lot about Daniel in the lion's den, but we hear nothing about Daniel in his official capacity as Belteshazzar, head magician to the king of Babylon, and satrap Chaldea. Another thing that interests me was the curious business of the battle of the kings in the valley, 4 against 5. Amraphael, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elazar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. I knew nothing whatever about them, but their names were magnificent and sang in my head. Then there was the even odder incident of Melchizedek, king of Salem,
Oh dear.
priest of the Most High God, who went out to meet Abraham, bearing bread and wine after the fight was over.
Well,
and
there's
the
that
kings
high
were
magic
all
group,
sunk
the
into
Order.
slime pits.
High magic group, the Order of Melchizedek. So,
Who was this priest of a forgotten worship whom Abraham honoured? I admit candidly that there is a great deal about the Old Testament worthies that I do not find admirable, but I found these fascinating. So I added a Chaldean incarnation in the days of Abraham to my collection.
Chaldean numbers are a big deal.
Then my efforts were met with a setback. I saw a lecture on reincarnation advertised at the local lodge of the Theosophical Society, so I went to hear it, and it sounded good to me. But in the question time at the end, the lady got up and said that she was a reincarnation of Hypatia, and the chairman got up and said she couldn't be, as that was Mrs. Besant. Then the ladies started to argue, and they played a tune on the piano to drown her voice, and I went home with my tail between my legs and dropped Kedorlaomer and company into the discard.
There's 2 guys down here say they're Jesus. One of them's obviously.
Yes, one of them must be wrong.
I was a bit shy of reincarnation fantasies for some time after that, and took up my old interest in communing with the moon. The little river under my window was tidal, and one could tell by its voice whether the tide was doing away on the coast. Just above the garden was a weir that marked the end of the tide water. When the tide was high, it was silent. But when the tide was low, there was a lovely silver waterfall effect. There was also a distant smell of the sea at such time that I rather liked, though I believed it was supposed to be very unwholesome. It always puzzled the doctor why I, an alleged asthmatic, could bear to live over water like that, but he put it down to being salt water. But as a matter of fact, I think my asthma started over the hell of a shindy
with my family. An argument.
An argument. And I got the first relief from it when I cleared out into the stables and slammed the door behind me. After all, asthma is not the same as bronchitis. There is nothing actually wrong with the works. It's simply that your extensors and flexors cannot agree to defer, and they jam the bellows.
That's one way of putting it.
Anyway, I liked the seaweedy smell that came to me when the tide was low, the mist that rose from the water that lay in the deep ravine and never got as far as my window, but looked like a series of pools and lagoons in the moonlight, with the moonlight in it and the trees rising out of it like ships in the full sail. And when the tide was making away on the bay, and the salt water pushing back the fresh water and banking it up against the weir till the sluices at the mouth should open and turn on the flood, there was a curious voice in the water as it gurgled and eddied, a restless contending voice, a restless contending voice, as if the sea and the land were at loggerheads. I used to listen to the land water trying to push back and the sea water, and I remembered that I had read of our local archaeology, for this is part of the world that was all drowned land. There were knolls that rose like islands in the salt marsh, and seaways through the slime when the tide was high, for all earth about here was estuary silt brought down from the hills of Wales. If the sea banks went on the bay, the salting would be 6 foot deep in the flood water. Dutch William made the banks, and they burst once, and the water came up to our church. That is why there are sluices at Dickmouth that only open at half tide. It is all salt marsh between us and the sea, and the town stands on the first of the rising ground. Behind the town is a wooded ridge that carries the road, and coming home along it in the dusk, one can see the marshes full of mists mile after mile, and when the moon is bright, it looks like water, and one could believe that the sea had come again to drown the land. There has always been a strange fascination for me in the story of the lost land of Lioness. That's like an Atlantis kind of thing, right? With its drowned churches whose bells rang fathoms deep. I have been out in a rowboat off Dickmouth and seen distinctly through its clear, still water the neap tide, the walls and towers of the old monastery that was drowned when the river shifted its bed one night in a storm. I often thought, too, of the Breton legend of the lost city of Ys and its magicians, and how treachery delivered the keys of the sea gates one night, and the sea came in and overwhelmed it. And I wondered what was the riddle of Karnak, and our own Stonehenge, and who were the men that built them, and why. And it seemed to me that there were 2 worships, one of the sun and one of the moon, and that my love of the moon and the sea was the older, and was the other as the other is to us. And I could believe that the druids, priests of the sun cult, must have looked upon the strange sea fires and forgotten worship that we look upon in the barrows and the dolmens. For it came to me, and I don't know why, that those who worshiped the moon and the sea built great fires at the uttermost neap. And as the tide came in, it took them. I could see the flaming pyre of drift on the rocks, laid bare once a year, black rock, covered with deep sea slime, and giant fucus, and great thriving shellfish that feared no fisher. There was a pyramidal pyre of burning drift, blue flamed from the salt, and the slow waves licked towards it as the tide rose, and it hissed and blackened below, till at last the high fiery crest fell sparkling into the water, and all was still, save for the slow quiet wash of the dark waves on the rocks again, taking back to their depths the giant fucus and the great shellfish. Sometimes these visions of the inward-looking eye had a strange reality and validity. Couldn't make my tongue do it for me. Strange reality and validity for me. In them I could do what is very seldom done in a dream. I could smell the peculiar acrid smell of burning wood, extinguished by the salt water.
Fascinating, eh? What do you think? We've got time for another chapter?
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah.
All right, so chapter 4 then. Excuse me. Well, things went on with me much as usual. No better and no worse. In fact, I think on the whole a little better after one diabolical bout of asthma. And it came towards spring again. And round about March quarter day, when of course we were particularly busy in the office, I had a very curious experience. The doctor had seen fit to shoot me full of dope without waiting for me to get into extremis, having had the wind put up him by my last performance, and I was living in my usual moribund condition, not caring if the skies fell in on me, when I had a queer vision between sleeping and waking. I seemed to go out of my body and leave it behind me after the manner that Muldoon describes. and I found myself in the saltings towards Bell Head.
Oh, he's on an astral journey.
I remember noting with a feeling of surprise that it was from all firm, level, yellow sandbanks instead of the dark alluvial mud we have nowadays. Obviously, there were no sea dikes, but apparently when it was water, and when it was land, instead of the marshy mixture we have nowadays. It seemed to me that I was standing on a rocky outcrop with nesting seabirds all around me, and above my head, on a high pole, was a fire basket. Behind me, on the scanty beach, a small rowboat, or rather paddle boat, was drawn up, and it was exactly like the pictures of coracles in the history books. I was waiting beside the beacon, ready to light it when a ship should be coming up the channel through the marshes, and we had been waiting and watching for days for that ship. When it came from a far sea voyage, and I was getting pretty sick of it, then, unexpectedly close, I saw the ship through the sea mist and the dusk, and she was a long, low craft undecked amidships, where there were rowers, and she had a single mast with a great purple sail, and on the sail were embroidered the faded remains of a crimson dragon. As she drew close, I shouted. It was too late to fire the beacon. They dropped the sail with a run and backed water with the oars and just kept her off the sandbank. And as they drifted past within a stone's throw, I was sitting high on the stern poop, a woman in a cavern chair. She had a great book in her lap, and at the commotion with the sail, she raised her head, and I saw she had a pale face and scarlet lips, and long dark hair like seaweed in the tide. Round her hair, binding it, was a gold and jewelled band. For those moments, as the boat wore off the sandbank, I looked into her face, and she into mine, and her eyes were strange eyes, as of a sea goddess. I remembered that the boat we were waiting was bringing a strange priestess from the land beyond the sunset, who was needed for our worship. For the sea was breaking the dikes and drowning the land, and it was said she had the magic that could master it. Now this, I thought, is the sea priestess we have been awaiting. And I looked at her, and she looked at me. Then she passed in a boat and disappeared in the mist and the dusk, and I knew that she was going to the high knoll that rose from the estuary some miles inland. On its crest was an open temple of stones and a perpetual fire sacred to the sun, but underneath was a sea cave where the water rose and took the sacrifices bound alive to the rocks. It was rumoured that the sea priestess would require many sacrifices for her goddess, and when I remembered her cold, strange eyes, I believed it.
This doesn't sound good.
Then I had to pull myself together and help Scotty with the quarterly accounting, and there was no more time for daydreaming of sea priestesses or anything else. Now it so happened.
Now it so happened that back in my grandfather's time there had been an old gentleman by the name of Morgan, who had owned a lot of land around these parts, and as he got ancient, he put it in the hands of our firm as agents to manage it. Then he departed and left an old sister to carry on, and the old sister had a companion, supposed to be a niece, a foreign-looking woman, reputed to be of French extraction. The Morgans themselves must have been Welsh at some time, as the name indicates anyway. They never really seemed to belong roundabout, though they had been here for countless generations. Well, the old lady made a will leaving everything to the companion, which was not unreasonable, as she had neither kin nor kith nor kin. Being the last of her line, she left it on condition that the companion took on the name of Morgan, which she did, calling herself LeFay Morgan, she having originally been Miss LeFay. Of course, the neighborhood never managed the LeFay Morgan, and when the generation that had known her as Miss LeFay died out, the next generation called her Miss Morgan. That's French.
Toute courte.
Toute courte. My father, acting for old Miss Morgan the First, had hocked all the agricultural land to the old Colonel Morgan, which old Colonel Morgan had pinced his faith and brought plots at Dickmouth, believing it to be a rising seaside town, for the railway had got us as far. Yeah.
Got as far as us. Oh, on the end of the railway. People are coming to visit.
And was expected to go to the coast in the future, but as luck would have it, there came a slump in the railway building at that moment, and the railway stopped where it was. Consequently, he had sold everything that was worth having and bought what wasn't, and luckily for him, the old lady died, or I should imagine he would have heard about it. In anticipation of the expected seaside booms, he had put up rows and terraces of pretentious family mansions in every direction at Dickmouth. There were shops and dreadful mangy arcade
Oh dear.
where the station ought to have been, but wasn't, and there was a site for a pier, which thank God was never built. With the coming of the motors, Dickmouth had perked up a bit, and in the end we had gotten particularly everything let at a price, but there was precious little profit on the estate by the time we had finished propping it up and sticking it together, for the pater had been a prophet Jeremiah of all the jerry builders. So,
Obviously put together well.
Jerrying, yeah, like jerry rigging, yeah. Consequently, the companion who ought to have been well off if she had what the old lady had intended for her to have, only got about enough to hold body and soul together and keep her in the black bombazine. I guess that means keep her in out of the red.
Maybe in black bombazine, whatever. Or it could be, I guess it's clothing. I don't know.
I have no idea.
Nothing fancy.
Then after we had fixed up all the 21-year leases and knockout prices, the railway pulled itself together and did the last lap, and our 75-pound leases commanded premiums of $400 to $500 when they changed hands. However, all things came to an end in time, even the leases, and it was our turn. I had been able to send Miss Morgan II some quite decent checks for the last few quarters, so it looked as if she would have a bit of prosperity in her declining years to make up for the uncommon lean times she must have had in her middle ones. A lot to be done about the estate now, and the leases were falling in. I didn't think it was the slightest use patching up my father's white elephants anymore. In fact, some of them had forestalled the leases by falling in on their own account. Oh dear. The rest were coming to roost, or whatever it is white elephants do when their day is over. I had got her a decent figure for the site of the pier, and a really handsome one for that dreadful arcade, which had been boarded up as a dangerous structure for the last 5 years. But I thought it was a pity to sell any more sites, as I happened to know from inside information that the railway was going to be electrified. So I thought I would see if I couldn't do a deal with Miss Morgan, and we find the money for rebuilding and the share the proceeds with her. It would be a dashed good deal for her, and we should have her pick up a bit at every cornering and every turn of the proceeds. That's how house agents live. Nibble, nibble, nibbles down the line.
My. Nibblers, nibblers, nibblers all down the line.
How did he go from being in an astral journey to talking about his real estate?
Well, that's where he said, we jumped from the last one. I had to pull myself together and keep
he had to
Scotty,
go. Yeah, he had to
Anyway,
go with Scotty.
My father had let these blessed white elephants on repairing leases as far as possible.
They suck repairing leases.
Well,
that
apparently
means the tenant has to fix everything. Like you don't have a
a
landlord.
repairing lease is a curious arrangement whereby one man spends money on another man's property. Towards the end of the lease, he just naturally doesn't spend it. My father had also believed in using a thin layer of cement as facing for cheap brick. This is all right if you use good cement that sticketh closer than a brother, but if you don't and the pater just naturally wouldn't, it comes up like gum boils at the first frosty night and then blows off on the first windy one. The poor devils who took those houses on repairing leases got a dashed thin deal. Well, the houses and leases were all falling in together and something had to be done about it. Scotty was going up to London to give evidence in some lawsuit of a client of ours, and I suggested to him that he should call on Miss Le Fay Morgan and put before her my idea for rebuilding instead of selling sites. It is my experience that women take things in much better when they are told than when they are written to. As a matter of fact, being out of their depth when it comes to house property, they judge the man and not the scheme. I knew that Scotty was bound to make a good impression with his overwhelming air of prudence and probity, so I sent him along. In due course he came back, like Noah's dove, but it wasn't an olive branch he had in his mouth, not by a long chalk. He had met with scandal. It appeared that he had gone to the address we had on our books, and it turned out to be a kind of converted mews that had become a studio. Old Scotty had toiled up a chicken ladder to whatever should have been the hayloft, and found that all the chairs had the legs sawn off, so that one was practically sitting on the floor, and around all the walls were divans made of the simple expedient of putting box mattresses on the floor and throwing Persian rugs over them. Scotty knew they were box mattresses because he turned up their skirts and had a look.
What a strange place.
Mattresses were inextricably associated in Scotty's mind with beds, and he was shocked. I pointed out that there was safety in numbers, but it did no good. I said I was shocked myself at him lifting their petticoats and looking at their legs. That did still less good. He said that as soon as ever he came in and saw those sawn-off chairs, he knew there was something wrong, and when the lady came in, he knew he was right. "How long have we done business with this lady?" he said. "God knows," said I. Scotty sniffed. He never gets used to hearing me take the name of the Lord in vain. "Her name was on the books when I joined the firm," he said.
Oh boy.
"Her name was on the books when I was born," I said. "Well, what age would ye say she was?" said Scotty. "Getting on," said I. "I'm 36, and she was pasting into my parent properly from the earliest I can remember." "Ah well," said Scotty, "a lady came into the room, if you call it. I should call it a barn myself, and I said to her, 'I wish to see Miss Le Fay Morgan,' and she said, 'I am Miss Le Fay Morgan,' and I said, 'You are very well preserved, madam, if you'll pardon me saying so,' and she went a very bright pink and said, 'I think you'd better do your business by letter,' and I said, 'I think I better had.'" From all which I gathered the lady with whom he had been doing business for years as Miss Le Fay Morgan jolly well wasn't Miss Le Fay Morgan, whoever else she might be. Well, that put us in a rather queer position. Was it our business to rout out the genuine Miss Le Fay Morgan? We had a look at the correspondence, which was as bulky as the family Bible, and the signature never varied, right down through the ages. I took the first and the last and a selection of intermediates and went over to see the bank manager. He and his cashier had a look at them and pronounced them perfectly okay. I came back to Scotty and we scratched our heads. At that moment, the afternoon post came in, and we scratched our heads still further, for there was a letter from Miss Le Fay Morgan to say she was at the Grand Hotel, Dickmouth, and would the senior partner go over and take her round the property, as she has always transacted her business with his father. "A precocious bairn," said Scotty. "Will you go?" "You bet I'll go," said I. "Don't part with any money," said Scotty. Do you want to do another chapter? How long is chapter 5?
Chapter 5 is quite a long one.
Maybe not then, because it's 10 to now, isn't it? So, I don't know. Intrigue!
How long is it?
So, I don't know. There's quite a few pages. It's going to probably take us till half hour.
It'll take more than, I don't know.
Chapter 6.
5 pages.
That's up to you. We might get it in. Whatever you want to do. I don't
Well, I'm
mind if we...
intrigued now, so we'll go till 9 and we'll stop wherever that is. Even if it's in the middle of the chapter, we can
Oh,
mark
we
it.
can't stop in the middle of a chapter. It'd be a total cliffhanger. A
It
cliffhanger.
is kind of now.
So, aren't you fascinated how this person does not seem to age?
I drove over to Dickmouth and went to the Grand Hotel and asked for Miss LaFay Morgan. The page parked me in an enormous palm court, and I amused myself by watching the people. Dickmouth was becoming distinctly posh, and they were worth watching. It is always a marvel to me why women wear things that are intrinsically ugly in an effort to appeal beautiful. Then a woman came in. She was tall and slight, and she had got a black velvet tam o' shanter, so that's like a hat,
It is. It's a Scottish hat.
with a diamond clip in it, and a black fur coat with an enormous collar and cuffs. I thought she looked well in it, though she was quite different from the others. She had a long, straight, draped line, whereas they had bits stuck on here and there. I could not see her face because of the tam was pulled down over the ear that was towards me, and her huge collar was up, but I could tell by the way she moved she was a beautiful woman. She looked around as if looking for someone, called a page, and the page pointed at me.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I said to myself, so you're the lady who saws legs off chairs, aren't you? She came over to me, and I rose to greet her. I couldn't see much of her face because of the collar, but I was quite enough to know why Scotty had come home so hastily. She had fine eyes, and her lips were heavily painted. That, of course, would have been enough for Scotty any dark night. It is a curious thing to look back on the first meeting with a person who subsequently plans an important part in one's life and see whether one had made any premonition of what was to come. I can honestly say that although I hadn't seen the woman's face, I should never have looked at anyone else while she was in the room.
Oh, hello.
She gave me her hand, and we did the polite, and I stared at her. Her eyes looked into mine very steadily. She had come down to grip a nettle, if I was not very much mistaken. Scotty had evidently made no secret of his view of the situation. It was not difficult to guess why she had come. Scotty, duly espoused to the undertaker's daughter, was highly uninflammable, and Miss LaFay, very wisely, had not tried anything on with him. I might prove different material, however, if I took after the old man. He had led my mother, the devil of the dance.
Oh, dear.
Mr. Maxwell, she said. Yes, I said. I knew your father, she said. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't very well tell the woman to her face that she was a liar, and I didn't want to. I once heard Sarah Bernhardt give a scene from
Legend.
a musical.
A
It's
musical
called
term.
Turn. She was old, and this woman must be old. If she were to be believed, and I was more than half inclined to believe her at the moment, and she had the same kind of golden throaty voice. King Lear said that a low voice is an excellent thing in women, but I doubt if he had this kind of low voice in mind when he spoke. I took her out to my car. She didn't speak again. She was evidently a woman who knew how to be still, and very potent.
A very potent thing
if anyone really knows how to do it. Yeah. As I put her into my car, I observed her ankles. You're no hag, beauty, I said to myself as I looked at those ankles. She had very fine stockings on. Stockings are very revealing of a woman's status.
Is that so? Is that so? She sat in silence in the car. I felt I had to speak. I made some trite remark about the place. She said yes, and that was all. But I was getting more conscious of her with every moment I spent beside her. I had planned out a circular tour, and we parked the car at a strategic spot and began to visit the houses. Then I learnt something else about Miss LaFay Morgan. There was not much about house property she did not know. Moreover, she knew not only in builder's terms and all his little tricks, but she also had a sound grasp of first principles. That is not a thing that everyone acquires, even with experience. But the thing had always struck me about Miss Morgan's correspondence with us, even that which dated back a quarter of a century, was her remarkable grasp of first principles. I was glad my companion had her collar up. I did not particularly want to see her face. In fact, I definitely preferred not to. We had worked our way down to a house at the end of the esplanade, and had some distance to walk back to the car. It was a small detached villa residence, standing in its own grounds, much gone to seed, and from the back windows one could see right out over the marshlands round the estuary. I looked out and I saw the devil's own squall coming up over the levels. "We'd better wait till that has blown over," said I. She looked out, saw the distant hills rapidly disappearing, and agreed. We were in a small kind of back study with a gas fire. I had noticed a shilling in the slot meter in the scullery, so I slipped a shilling into it and put a match to the fire. So you have to pay as you go meter.
And yeah, for electric sometimes too.
And for gas. I remember my grandmother had a gas meter.
One of the people that worked for us in Bishop's Castle had to pay electric meters still.
Yeah, they were common. They
Way
were
out
very
in
common.
the sticks there. But
They were very common, yeah. There was, however, nothing to sit on. Miss Morgan solved the problem by sitting on the floor, putting her back against the wall, stretching her long, slender legs straight out in front of her, and crossing her ankles. I had another view of her very nice stockings. "I like sitting on the floor," she said. "Is that why you saw the legs off your chairs?" I asked, without thinking what I was saying, for hitherto I had been most carefully professional with her. She laughed. That deep, golden, throaty laugh that gave me a queer feeling, even the first time I heard it. "I'm afraid I was altogether too much for your partner," she said. "Yes, I'm afraid you were," I said, not knowing what else to say. "He's not the kind of person one can explain things to," said she. "Am I?" said I, with a sudden revulsion of feeling of being vamped. She considered me. "You are better than he is, but not much," she added as an afterthought, and we both laughed. It flashed into my mind that she had shifted her ground very quickly and cleverly when she sensed my reaction, or else she'd never meant to vamp me. I rather inclined to the latter view. I felt instinctively that there was something fine about Miss Le Fay Morgan. Anyway, she was distinctly a personality, and one can forgive a lot to that. The storm struck the windows with a swish and distracted our attention, for which I was not sorry, for I wanted to scramble back to the safety of professionalism, if that were possible, while one was sitting cross-legged on the floor with a person. But Miss Le Fay Morgan wasn't having any. She had come to grip a nettle, and she laid hold of it. "I want to talk to you," she said. I pulled my face together and made it as blank as I knew how, and stood on guard. "Your partner made no bones about calling me a thief," she said. "And if I am not much mistaken, he had it in his mind to call me a murderer too. We should certainly like to know what has become of Miss Le Fay Morgan." "I am Miss Le Fay Morgan." I did not answer, for it was raining like liquid Hades, and neither of us would want to walk out and slam the door in weather like that. "Don't you believe me?" she asked.
Nope.
"I'm not in a position to judge," said I. "I can't see much of you behind that collar." She raised her hands and loosened her coat at the neck, and it fell, revealing face and breast. She was a dark woman, brown-eyed, black-browed, slightly aquiline, and her skin was a very pale olive, more creamy than olive, in fact. Her eyes were not darkened with mascara. They did not need it, but her lips were pillar-box scarlet. She had long, slender white hands too, and the nails were filed to a point and looked as if they had been dipped in blood. So, altogether, With the black furs and white face and splashes of scarlet at the mouth and nails, she was a pretty startling figure to let loose on a bachelor from a one-eyed hole like Dickford. As she opened her coat, a whiff of scent, aromatic and spicy, not sweet, came across me. It was a very queer scent, and I think there was a good deal of musk in it.
Patchouli.
I took a reef in my backbone and thought hard of a state agency.
There you go.
Do you want that?
No, I think that's where we're going to stop.
Oh, right. Okay. So what a stunning woman, eh?
And what age
And how old could she be? Oh, probably 100.
Look, so I can put our little marker there.
Oh, well, that's clever. Let's not mess with that.
Oh, wait. I've got to open it.
Apparently you didn't work it.
Well, I thought they stuck together, but they don't. But I can do this.
They're supposed to stick together. Oh.
See?
Oh, they open. That's wonderful.
Right. Miss Morgan Le Fay, how old are you?
We will take bets for next week. How old do you think she is?
It's very interesting.
Very interesting,
I
isn't it?
assume we're going to find out that she is the sea priestess, but
Oh, I think so.
right.
It's interesting she should appear in his daydream.
Well, is she in his daydream?
He largely described her, didn't he? As she
Yeah.
came sailing in
But
on
now
that
she's in
vessel.
his real life,
Mm.
or so we think.
But where does reality begin?
Ooh, it's that liminal. All right, folks.
And what sacrifice does she demand?
I don't know.
Oh, hey. Well, there you go. Isn't this fascinating?
All right.
These other cliffhangers will be answered next time we come to do it. We're up to, I don't know, you'll have to tell us.
Middle of chapter 5.
Middle of chapter 5. Part way into chapter 5. So there you go.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're going to go and rustle up something to eat and have a bite and chill.
Thank you.
We've got to finish moving the furniture now, though.
We do.
We do.
All right.
All right. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Have a beautiful
Peace.
evening. Be well. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.